We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody's ready for what should be a fun day and a fun week of shows ahead. I'll just give you the quick scheduling note off the top. We have two just insane days of college hoops ahead of us, Tuesday night and Wednesday night. We would normally go live later in the evening. There's just some scheduling conflicts on my behalf. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with college football today. We're going to talk transfer portal. It is officially open, and it isn't even open yet. I take that back. It's not even open yet, and it's already popping. And then on top of that, I do want to get to some interesting sound as another head coach does call out Ryan Day after Ohio State's performance on Saturday against Michigan. And then we're going to preview college hoops, but kind of just, again, the schedule's a little bit different. The schedule's a little bit weird. We'll quickly look at a loaded Tuesday night slate, Kentucky-Clemson, Tennessee-Syracuse, Miami versus Arkansas. Then we'll kind of do a deep dive on some of the Wednesday games as Auburn plays Duke, Carolina plays Alabama, UConn plays Baylor. We will do another show on Wednesday, by the way, reacting to what happens on Tuesday. Again, the simple answer would have just been to just do a show on Tuesday night and Wednesday night. Scheduling conflicts do not allow, but we'll open with CFB Portal. We will then go to one coach calling out Ryan Day. And finally, we will hit on college hoops preview. Before we get started, though, do want to send out a couple quick reminders. First of all, make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. YouTube, 47K. We hit 47K this week. I cannot believe the growth of the channel. I appreciate your support. But if you're not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. Also, by the way, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, Apple, Spotify. You want to do your boy Torres a solid, leave a 5-star rating, leave a little bit of a short review. Let America know how much I love the Torres Pod. Speaking of loving, you know what I love this time of year? I love me some Cauli Puffs and CauliPuffs.com. Okay, so Cauli Puffs, of course, they've been with us all fall. They are the delicious, healthy alternative in your snack aisle and in your grocery aisle, okay? So Cauli Puffs, family-owned business. Listen, by the way, I shouldn't even backtrack. It's football season. By the way, it's holiday season. You're sitting on the couch. You're with friends and family. You're starting to look like a little bit of a slob after Thanksgiving. Guess what? Me too. No big deal. It happens to the best of us. But at the same time, as we go forward, you're going to be on the couch. You're going to be with friends and family. You're going to be watching football. You're going to be watching basketball. And what you need is a healthy snack and a healthy alternative to all that crap in your grocery aisle. Well, that, my friends, is where Cauli Puffs comes in, okay? These are the new age snack. They are baked, not fried, healthy ingredients. They use avocado oil, no grease. But here's the great part. Unlike the other stuff in the grocery aisle that makes you fat, that makes you gross, no. Cauli Puffs are delicious, but they are also healthy as well. Bottom line, at this point, you don't have to take my word for it. All you got to do is one of two things. Go to CauliPuffs.com. That's CauliPuffs.com. Try them out for yourself. Multiple flavors. Try them out. Get a variety pack. You're going to love them. But then also, they are available on Amazon.com as well. All you got to do, search Cauli Puffs on Amazon. And from there, throw a couple in your cart. Let them know that Torres sent you. You'll love them. You'll like them. Again, your cart's already bustling with stuff for the holidays. Do Torres a favor. Throw some Cauli Puffs in. You will not be disappointed. With that said, it is a busy Tuesday in a busy time in college sports. There is no more time to waste. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. By the way, make sure to drop your questions, comments, thoughts in the chat here. We appreciate everybody who's coming in to talk college hoops and college football. Do want to open with some college football, though, because it's interesting. Regular season is done. Conference championships are this weekend. We're going to preview all of it here in the coming days. But at the same time, with most of college football not playing again until bowl season, some teams are done altogether. You know what that means? It means that it is portal season, baby. And listen, one thing we always do in the spring for college basketball, but also in the fall into the winter here this time of year, we're also going to talk a lot about college football portal season. It's crazy. The portal is not technically open yet by NCAA guidelines, but it doesn't stop the young men across the country in college football from hitting up Hayes Fawcett and saying, hey, make me a graphic because I'm out of here. And so what I want to do is talk about the portal, talk about some of the early names that are already in. Before we do, though, let me just say this. I think this is going to be the most interesting year in the portal, both for football and basketball, by the way. And I'll tell you why. It is because this is the first year since the portal became a thing. There are no more really COVID seniors. In other words, everybody after the 2021 season, if you want to remember in 2021, you could opt out of the season. And if you did not want to play because of COVID concerns, you did not lose a year of eligibility. Okay. So everybody got an extra year of eligibility. Well, this is the first year that we're not really going to have players, that have that COVID year of eligibility. And so because of it, it just dwindles the pool of people that are even going to enter the portal, which makes it fascinating. I remember in the spring with basketball, Sean Miller was the coach at Xavier, came out and said, listen, we got to take advantage. And he threw out the stat. He said, look, my guys have done the research. 25% of all guys in the portal are COVID seniors. Next year, the pool could be up to 25% less total players. So I bring it up because I think that college football is going to be fascinating. I think bottom line, there's going to be a supply and demand issue. The demand is going to be much greater than supply, especially at all the key positions: quarterback, wide receiver, defensive end, offensive tackle, whatever. And so I think it's going to be kind of interesting because I think we all think that there's kind of this, there was a boom with NIL money and now the money's going to come back to I think it's going to be the opposite. I think kids are going to get paid because I don't think there's going to be nearly as much talent as teams that need said talent in the portal. So like I said, portal doesn't technically open until next Monday. But with that said, it didn't stop anybody from entering the portal. So let's get to just a few of the big names that are already in. And let's start with probably the biggest name. And this probably reflects that this isn't going to be the greatest portal season ever, but it's Miller Moss, the quarterback from USC. Okay. And so Miller Moss, very interesting player. 3 years at USC, 1 under Clay Helton, 2 backing up Caleb Williams. Comes in last year in the bowl game. I think there was a thought that he was going to enter the portal last year. And I think there was a thought that USC was going to take a portal quarterback a year ago. It's easy to forget this now. Will Howard, who of course just famously lost to Michigan a few days ago, took a visit to USC, and there was thought that he was going to go to USC. Miller Moss goes to the bowl game, throws 6 touchdowns. Everybody thinks he's great. He decides to come back. He gets the starting job. And I'll be honest, like I don't think he's like the greatest quarterback ever, but I think he's very serviceable. And I think he got kind of a bum rap towards the end of the season at USC. When USC was struggling, now listen, bottom line is we can't deny the fact that USC was not very good and he had a lot to do with it. But at the same time, like when I look at what USC's problems were, I think he was part of the problem. But I actually think that Lincoln Riley felt a little bit of pressure to go ahead and make the quarterback change, not because there was a better option on the team, but instead because he just had to get the fans off his back. So Jaden Mayava gets the opportunity. I don't think Jaden Mayava was any better. They got destroyed by Notre Dame on the final game of the regular season, obviously barely beat UCLA to end the year. But Miller Moss, because of who he is, because he is a 4th going on 5th year guy, because of the fact that he has game experience in a power conference, is going to be in demand. This is a kid that this season did complete 64% of his passes, 18 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, did beat LSU, did have USC in position to beat Penn State early in the season. So it's going to be fascinating. But what's also going to be fascinating is this. Some of the schools that are being linked to Miller Moss have a freshman quarterback. And so I'm just curious with the quarterback dominoes, what it is going to mean in the bigger picture, because some schools like a Michigan, like a Auburn, like maybe even a USC, They are going to bring in young quarterbacks that are expected to play right away and contribute right away. We know about Michigan, Bryce Underwood, the $12 million man. I think the number's at about $12 million is what they paid for Bryce Underwood. Obviously at Auburn, they're bringing in a kid by the name of Deuce Knight. Okay. So I just bring it up to very simply say Miller Moss has been linked early to Michigan and Auburn. And my whole thing, if I'm him, I think there's a scenario where I can get drafted after this year if I go to the right school. So the question becomes, do you go to a school like Michigan? Do you go to a school like Auburn, where you're probably going to have to almost serve as that veteran mentor role for a kid that is kind of coming up? No different in the NFL that, whoever, Alex Smith mentors Patrick Mahomes for a year before giving up the job to Patrick Mahomes. So it's going to be fascinating, but Miller Moss was a kid that was projected to go in the portal since the day he got benched. It's not really a surprise. The early speculation was Michigan. Now I tend to think that that's probably not going to happen for the fact that he probably wants to play and play a lot and not serve as a mentor. So we'll see where he ends up. Other schools, by the way, outside of Michigan and Auburn that have been speculated with Miller Moss. There is some speculation on Iowa. I've seen a couple other schools as well. Louisville is obviously going to need a quarterback with Jeff Brom. So Miller Moss, probably the most high-profile name that has entered the portal so far. Really quickly, let's get to the next quarterback that is at least an interesting name. And this is a kid that listen, I think producer Matt probably knows pretty well, Caton Salter, who, of course, spent the last 3 years at Liberty. If you're not familiar with Liberty, remember, it was 2 years ago that Liberty went, 12-0, 13-0, played Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. This was a kid, by the way, it's worth noting, I should even backtrack, played for Hugh Freeze at Liberty, had a ton of success under Hugh Freeze. He decides to come back to Liberty, balls out as a last 2 seasons ago in the 2023 season, finishes that season throwing for 32 touchdowns on 61% completion percentage. And oh, by the way, on top of that, he also rushed for 12 more touchdowns. So a year ago, he enters the portal. Everybody's like, oh my goodness, is he going to follow Hugh Freeze to Auburn? Is he going to go somewhere else? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? Well, he comes back to Liberty. The season does not go quite as planned. He had some injuries. There were some issues, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Still throws for 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but his completion percentage is down. His rushing numbers are down. It's not going to stop somebody from taking a chance on him because, again, ultimately, the supply of quarterbacks in the portal is not going to be as great as the demand. I think the obvious name, the obvious place where I would expect him to probably land, let's call a spade a spade. You got to think it's Auburn, right? So Auburn, first of all, the Payton Thorne era is over. Thank the Lord, sweet Jesus. It was a tough watch there at some points, okay? But Payton Thorne is going to be gone. Obviously, we saw speculation that Hank Brown, who was his backup, is going to go into the portal as well. And so I just bring it up to very simply say that when I look at the situation at Auburn, they are bringing in, as I said, a 5-star freshman named Deuce Knight next year, but he's not the kind of kid that you're just going to hand the keys to day one, or at least that's not the speculation right now. You're going to want to bring in a veteran quarterback. This feels like the kind of guy. Obviously, Auburn feels like the obvious choice to start there. We'll see what happens as he is, again, not technically in the portal, but he's sort of in the portal, so we will evaluate that from there. Let's go to the wide receiver position really quick. And rip through a couple names because I'll say this. I saw an article about 2 weeks ago. It was almost like a portal primer from ESPN. Max Olson used to cover the portal at The Athletic. He is now at ESPN. But I just bring it up because he said that obviously quarterbacks are always in this NIL era going to make money. But he said there is a lot of demand for difference-making wide receivers. And the number one kid right now in the portal that you need to know is a kid by the name of Casey Concepcion. Okay, he played at NC State the last couple years. And by the way, 2 years ago was a freshman All-American at NC State. It's funny because I remember talking about this kid early in the year. Remember, NC State played Tennessee in week 2. NC State played Clemson early in the year. So you're just kind of learning these teams. You're like, oh, this kid was really good last year. Like a lot of other people, his numbers dipped a little bit. I think they dipped, frankly, because Oh, by the way, let's call a spade a spade. NC State wasn't very good this past season. So again, 2 years ago, 71 catches, 10 touchdowns, still had 53 catches with 6 touchdowns this year. As you can see on the screen, 124 catches, 16 touchdowns. You do that at the power forward level, you are going to be a kid that's in demand. So I bring it up because there is already a list. So you knew the kid was going to hit the portal when the list already emerges of schools that could hypothetically be interested. Nobody tampered, nobody did anything, nobody forced them into the portal. But I just bring it up because a list of schools has already emerged. Alabama is obviously going to be looking for wide receiver help alongside Ryan Williams. Auburn is always going to be looking for wide receiver help as they try to bring along whoever the quarterbacks are. The school that really interested me, though, Colorado, Coach Prime. Listen, you can criticize Coach Prime for whatever. He was awesome this year, but he has done an unbelievable job of evaluating wide receivers in the portal over the last couple of years. Forget Travis Hunter. He's, game-changing talent. But LeJontay Wester was a 1,000-yard receiver at Florida Atlantic. I remember talking about the portal, and we never really even discussed him last year. Shows you what Coach Prime saw in that kid. And now I think LeJontay Wester is going to be like a second or third round draft pick this year. 70 catches, 10 touchdowns for Colorado this year. So I'm talking about players currently on Colorado. But LeJontay Wester, Jimmy Horn 2 years ago, remember? Jimmy Horn had offers from Texas A&M, from Penn State. He ends up going to Colorado. So this kid, KC Concepcion, I will be fascinated. But listen, I think he's an early name to watch if you're a Colorado Buffaloes fan. And I know there are a lot of them out there. A couple other wide receivers really quickly. I think this is kind of an interesting name. A player that was a 5-star in the class of 2024, so a year ago, Micah Hudson. If you're not familiar with this name, okay? So he is the highest rated recruit to ever commit to Texas Tech in the recruiting era. Kind of an interesting backstory. Really was kind of an under-the-radar kid. Texas Tech gets him to commit. Then last year, after he commits, all the other big schools, Texas A&M, whoever, come in and try to convince him, hey, you need to come with us. Come be part of what we're doing. Well, he ends up going to Texas Tech. But unlike so many of these other 5-star freshman wide receivers, whether it was Ryan Williams at Alabama, whether it was Cam Coleman at Auburn, whether it was Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, Micah Hudson didn't really kind of have the impact that I think a lot of people thought he would. 8 catches, 123 yards in his one season at Texas Tech. Now he is in the portal. As of right now, I think it's a little early to speculate, but what I will tell you, point blank, end of story. 5-star wide receiver, class of 2024. He has relationships with all these schools. I would be stunned if he doesn't commit to one of these true blue blood schools, whether it's Texas, whether it's Bama. Listen, Colorado, obviously they're not a blue blood in the traditional sense, but they're going to put three receivers into the NFL draft this year, 2 receivers. Will Shepherd, I didn't even mention with the Colorado thing a minute ago. So I just bring it up because this is a kid, even though the production wasn't great, I promise you, this is a kid that is going to command and demand a lot of he's just going to be a kid that a lot of people are interested in. I'm fascinated to see his list, see his visits. He is another name to keep an eye on. Really quickly, and producer Matt, I apologize, I didn't even give you this, but I saw that there is a report, if I'm not mistaken, that CJ Daniels, who played this past year at LSU, could very well enter the portal. By the way, very tough day for LSU. One of their 5-star commits, this is not Bryce Underwood, but one of their 5-star commits decommitted is going to Texas. Well, I bring it up because CJ Daniels this year was a player that they were expecting big things from. He ends up with 42 catches for 480 yards, no touchdowns. There is a report that he is expected to enter the portal. Now, some people have refuted that report. So if you're listening to this show, we're recording at about 2:30 Eastern time. If you're listening, stuff can change. If he doesn't go in the portal, don't blame Torres. I'm just telling you what is being reported as of, again, 2:30 Eastern time right now. But he's kind of a big name to know. Another name, producer Matt, I forgot to tell you this one, so I apologize. But Jonte Cook was a former 5-star, played at Texas over the last couple of years. He actually announced like 3 or 4 weeks ago that he was going to be entering the portal, and he's another one. Even though the production wasn't through the roof at Texas, 16 catches, 2 touchdowns this season, it's not going to change the fact that he is going to be in demand. He's one I would expect to come off the board early because, of course, as I just said a second ago, he's been in the portal for a few days. Worth noting, a couple defensive players. Jamari Butler, a defensive lineman from Nebraska. Nebraska, for whatever reason, seems to be hemorrhaging players early in the portal cycle. But this was a kid that, again, Nebraska's defense was pretty good this season. He finished this past year. This is Jamari Butler with 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, was one of the best players on that defense. Nebraska has lost 1 or 2 other players to the portal since we started recording. So, yeah. All I'll say is it's about to get crazy. And again, it's that time of year. There's going to be a lot of players enter, but I'll say this really quickly. I'll be fascinated to see, again, the quality of player who enters the portal, because at the end of the day, really, if you think about the portal, and we've talked about this with basketball, with whatever, you think about it, is most of the good players fall into most of the players in the portal. Let me even backtrack. Fall into 4 buckets. They're either kids that aren't playing at a high major that are going to transfer, or Power 4 that are going to transfer. They're COVID kids, which we just talked about. They're players off of a coaching staff where there was a firing. So think back to last year, all the guys from Alabama that went in the portal, all the guys at Texas A&M went in the portal, et cetera. And then you have the group of 5 guys that are bouncing up a level that can play. And so I just bring it up because it's going to be fascinating. There was no real churn at the high major level. So, like, unless something crazy happens at Ohio State or USC or somebody, like that quality of player, the Caleb Downs type player, Walter Nolan, like, they're not going to be in the portal because those guys don't generally leave places that they're expected to be. So I just bring it up because you take out the COVID kids, you take out the fact that it's been a quieter recruiting cycle or a quieter coaching carousel cycle. I don't think the portal is going to be too crazy. But we've done enough portal. We will keep you updated as things go on, because I do think that it is about to get a little bit crazy. I already see some people talking about Miller Moss to Michigan in the chat, but that is our first of what I expect to be many portal updates. All right, so what I'm going to do, take a quick break, come back. When we come back, do want to react to some very interesting comments from one coach. Sort of called out Ryan Day, sort of didn't, tried to say he wasn't calling him out, but he sort of was. Oh, we'll discuss that. After that, we'll talk a lot of college hoops because we got a loaded slate of games coming up. Take a quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So real quick, do want to get to some college hoops in just a moment. But before we get to some college hoops, we got to get to what I still believe is the biggest story, at least for today, in college football. I think by the time we get to Wednesday, we're going to be reacting to the college football playoff rankings. All the betting odds seem to indicate that the committee's going to find a way to put Bama in. We'll have plenty to talk about on Wednesday. But to me, the biggest story in college football is still the fallout at Ohio State. Listen, I can tell you that I spent all day Sunday, all day Monday working the phones, talking to people, talking to sources, people in the athletic department, people around the campus, media members, etc. And I can tell you, it's a dark time at Ohio State right now, okay? Bottom line is that you go from, remember, 2 weeks ago, Indiana's in the top 5. You beat them pretty good at home. Now, I think, it was a little bit overblown how they beat them. Indiana gave them 14 points, neither here nor there, whatever. But you destroy Indiana. You're going to beat Michigan. You're going to go to the Big Ten championship game. Maybe you get revenge for Oregon. Even if you don't, you're probably going to be the 5 seed, and you're going to be rocking and rolling in this college football playoff. But now you lose to Michigan, and everything's up in the air. And I'll say this is I think morale is so low right now. We're going to get to the quote that I want to get to in just a minute. But morale is so low right now. The thing that I heard consistently talking to people close to the program, I think everybody in that athletic department, now I can't speak for fans. Fans, if you're watching, you can comment in the comments section. I think people in the athletic department are just praying that this Ohio State team can go on a run, because I think they know if they lose in the first round, if they go one and done with a $10 million or $20 million roster, all the coaching staff, the fact that, oh, by the way, you lose to Michigan for a 4th straight year and you don't get out of the first round of the playoffs, I think everybody knows you can't bring Ryan Day back. And so I'm not saying he's going to get fired, but what I am saying is you lose in round 1. I think they probably have to do it for all the financial reasons of raising money, of ticket prices, etc. So I just bring it up because I think everybody's like, okay, Michigan sucked. Now let's just pray we can go on a run. But that's the bottom line. That's where things are at with Ohio State. But what I want to talk about now is a very interesting quote that I think another coach kind of takes a shot at Ryan Day, but to me, it's kind of a metaphor for the state of the program, okay? Because you look at Ohio State, you look at Ryan Day, and you look at this 4-game losing streak to Michigan. And the one thing, people think I hate Ryan Day. I don't hate Ryan Day. But my criticism of Ryan Day, it's never anyone's fault. It's never Ryan Day's fault. It's always everyone else's fault, right? You lose to Michigan that first year. Oh, the whole locker room has the flu. Then you lose again. You got to change the defensive coordinator. You changed Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator. You blamed Connor Stallions. Well, guess what? Connor Stallions wasn't there on Saturday. You got your 2 coordinators, and you're still losing. But I go back to last year. This is when I knew this guy's kind of a phony, because you lose to Michigan last year. Remember, 3rd straight year you lose to Michigan. Now Michigan ends up going on to win the national championship. But after the game, I vividly remember this, and I remember talking about it for days on this podcast. What ends up happening is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. It's this, is that there's about a 12-hour window where everybody blames Ryan Day. Oh, he stinks. He'll never beat Michigan, whatever. And then I woke up that Sunday, and I was listening to some Ohio State podcasts and some YouTube stuff and whatever, and immediately the tone began to change. And the tone was this: well, Ryan Day's not good, but you know who's really to blame? Kyle McCord. Now, if you don't remember the name Kyle McCord, here's what you need to know. He was the Ohio State starting quarterback last year, was set to replace C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud leaves. There's a quarterback battle, and it never felt like Ryan Day really believed in him. In the preseason, you kind of heard that the backup, Devin Brown, was kind of in control. Then Devin Brown gets hurt. Then Kyle McCord starts, and Kyle McCord keeps winning games. He loses to Michigan, and it immediately becomes a situation where blame Kyle McCord. He's the problem. Our quarterback room isn't good enough. We need to upgrade. Devin Brown's better. This guy's better. Let's go to the portal. Let's whatever, blah, 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 blah. That was what happened last year. Well, I bring it up because on the same day that Ohio State lost to Michigan for the 4th straight year, that kid Kyle McCord, who a lot of people, unless you're an Ohio State fan or a Syracuse fan, you haven't thought about, well, Kyle McCord went to Syracuse, was named the starter, and you know what Syracuse did the same day that Ohio State lost to Michigan? Syracuse beat Miami, probably knocking them out of the college football playoff. Syracuse finishes the regular season 9-3, and it was interesting because on Monday, Syracuse head coach Fran Brown appeared on the Jim Rome show, and on the show was asked about Kyle McCord and his role in Syracuse's success. Producer Matt, play the sound.
I'm excited. I'm really happy for him. I'm happy for his family. It's a big deal. It's a big deal because he's from New Jersey and I'm from New Jersey. So I'm excited for just our communities. Everyone down there represents him, but just the country to be able to see how good of a football player he is. And, it was kind of put out as if he was the reason. So, I guess after watching him win this weekend, and I don't know what happened that piece of, you're seeing the same results again. You can't blame Kyle, correct? So I'm happy that Kyle was able to go and clear his name, come here and show that he's a good quarterback. I got ridiculed for stating that I wanted to send Ryan Day a bottle of champagne, where I wasn't being disrespectful. I was just saying, this guy is the real deal, and you guys let him come here. Like, great, thank you. I still owe him. I should send him some more. I should send him a case, not even a bottle. Excuse my language, but just extreme.
There you have it. Syracuse head coach Fran Brown saying I should send Ryan Day an effing case of champagne because he sent me this quarterback. And first of all, listen, I'm not here to criticize Fran Brown. He's standing up for his guy. But I like how he basically threw Ryan Day under the bus, says, yeah, I guess it's not Kyle McCord's fault this year. Then says, no, I wasn't really criticizing him, this and that. What I will say, though, Coach Brown, if you're watching, Syracuse fans, if you're watching, Fran Brown is 100% correct. And one, I totally love, I totally respect Fran Brown sticking up for his kid. First of all, that's what every kid wants from a coach. Two, it's so funny to see the dichotomy, right? I don't know Kyle McCord. I don't know the family. I don't know whatever. But when he left, it was, oh, he's the problem. And then they blamed I think his dad got into some weird thing with Ryan Day. And Ohio State fans, you can make fun of me for not knowing it. But, oh, his dad's a problem and his dad's this and his dad's that. Well, all he does is go to Syracuse and lead that program to 9 wins. And so, listen, I have no personal vendetta against Ryan Day, and I have no personal, affiliation with Kyle McCord, but I do think it's pretty cool that this kid goes and immediately has success, and Ohio State immediately has the same problems. I will also say this, Ohio State fans, and I think Ohio State fans, the blinders are finally coming off. I think you're finally waking up. Is that, listen, I know Ryan Day is not a bad person. I feel like anytime I criticize him, it comes off as mean-spirited or rude or whatever. But at this point, it's exactly what I just said a minute ago. You guys and girls are smart. You're seeing it with your own eyes. Is that every time something bad happens in that program, it's always somebody else's fault. And while I think Ryan Day is a good guy, I did not like how Kyle McCord got thrown under the bus, how Kyle McCord became the fall guy. Because if you remember last year, remember how it all played out. And again, we talked about it on this pod time and time again. So I know for a fact this is how it happened. But the season ends, blame Kyle McCord, then he hits the portal. And if you remember, leading up, they played Missouri in the Cotton Bowl last year. And all the conversation was Devin Brown's the guy. Devin Brown's a dog. He's got that toughness that Kyle McCord doesn't have. Then what happens? Devin Brown stinks for a drive or two. He gets hurt. And then, by the way, they threw Devin Brown to the bus. They were like, well, he's not good enough. We got to go get a difference maker in the portal. They go get Will Howard. And so I'm just sitting here saying, look, this is not a blame Will Howard. This is not a blame Devin Brown. This is not a praise Kyle McCord. But it was so obvious that Ryan Day was working his media back channels, blaming Kyle McCord because, God forbid, it can't be Ryan Day's fault. And what I will just say in the bigger picture, I am going to be absolutely fascinated to see what becomes of this season and what becomes of this offseason with Ryan Day. Now, listen, I've been critical, but I still think just if you win a playoff game, the timing's going to be kind of weird to fire him, right? Because you're now looking at around New Year's. And so I do think, one, I think if they're one and done, I think he's out. I think he's going to probably look for other jobs in the meantime. But I only bring it up to very simply say is that if he does come back, I think Ohio State fans, you got to have your antenna up because this one is all on him. And this is, by the way, why I think he probably should try and get another job. It's because everything is everybody else's fault. Well, you're out of people to blame. You blame the flu. You blame the defensive coordinator. Jim Knowles has been phenomenal this year. Only gave up 13 points to Michigan. You blamed the offensive coordinator. Oh, it's the play calling. I need an offense. Well, you got your hand-picked offensive coordinator. You got your hand-picked quarterback in Will Howard. You got the NIL money to get Caleb Downs, to retain so many guys on that roster, and you have the exact same results. So I think this is the moment in time where people just say, look, there's no more excuses. Ryan Day, you have everything you need to compete. And so I'm fascinated to see what the next few months and weeks hold out for Ohio State, because if you look at them, I'm sorry, listen, let me say this, and I'll finish Ohio State. We'll get to some college hoops. I disagree with the narrative from a lot of people because I've seen a lot of people make the argument that even with the loss to Michigan, they could still make a run. Yes, if you look at them on paper and if you look at the advanced metrics and if you look at the gambling markets and whatever, Yes, Ohio State is still one of the favorites to win the national championship. But how many times do we have to see Ryan Day's teams fall short in a big game with a loaded roster, in many cases the more talented roster, before we just say, like, he might just not be the guy? And so I'll be fascinated to see what happens. I think this season has been a metaphor for his entire regime, and that metaphor is pretty straightforward. You beat everybody you're supposed to. And that's why I don't think Ryan Day is a terrible coach. That's why I think Ryan Day should be looking for another job. Maybe UCF was the one I suggested on Monday's show. But I just bring it up because is that you look at this season, it's a perfect metaphor for the Ryan Day era, okay? You go to Oregon. You're as good as Oregon. The talent is there. But what happens? Will Howard slides a second too late. Questionable PI. Ohio State fans, I hate to disagree with you. I think it was the right call on Jeremiah Smith. I think it could have been a no call, but I think it was probably the right call. But you have two crucial plays in the final minute. Both go against Ohio State. Both go against Ryan Day. And then, of course, against Michigan, we know what happened. You had the two, missed field goals. You had to call a timeout out of the 2-minute timeout, the 2-minute warning, because you had too many guys on the field. It's the little stuff with Ryan Day. They blame everybody else. You go back to last year. Kyle McCord was the fall guy. I know he wasn't great against Michigan, but you know why you lost to Michigan? It was because in the final half of the fourth quarter, you could not get Michigan off the field. Went back and looked it up. I believe it was a 13-play, 7-minute drive, which gave you a field goal to go up 6 points for Michigan. It wasn't Kyle McCord's fault last year. At some point, this has to fall on Ryan Day. And by the way, if you are an Ohio State fan, you can see on the bottom of the screen, we have our Torres on Ohio State page, all my Ohio State coverage. Great intern named Dom helps me run it. And we're being fair, but I think critical of Ryan Day as we get set for National Signing Day. And oh, by the way, we also get set for whatever Ohio State's future is in the playoff. All right, so what we're going to do, take one more break. And when we come back, we got to talk some college hoops. College hoops, the next few days are going to be insane. We're going to quickly preview the Tuesday night games, do a little bit of a deep dive on some of the Wednesday games ahead. We got some great college hoops on the docket. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. Hi, back. Good to be back. So let me go ahead and say this. College football is awesome. As I said, we'll do a Wednesday show reacting to the college football playoff rankings. Sure does feel like Alabama's going to get the benefit of the doubt. But I also want to go ahead and look at just an insane couple days of college basketball ahead. Okay, so bottom line is last week was Feast Week. We had Maui and Battle for Atlantis and this new Players Era Festival, okay? But at the same time, we come back and then boom, there's an immediate turnaround with two kind of made-for-TV events, the ACC SEC Challenge, and then we have the Big 12 Big East Challenge. And what's awesome about this event is a couple things. We get a couple monster games, but we also get them on true home courts in college basketball. And I think as we go deeper into this NIL era, we're going to see more neutral site games. I don't think that problem is getting better. So over the next couple of weeks, we got some awesome games. Again, I apologize with the schedule. What we'll do is we'll quickly preview the Tuesday games, and then we will start looking ahead to deep dives on Wednesday. Tomorrow, we will do another show reacting to the college football playoff rankings, but also starting to react to whatever happens tonight, okay? So Tuesday night, a couple marquee games. The first one that I do want to get to, I did a deep dive preview on this one, so I'll be pretty quick, but it is Kentucky visiting Clemson on Tuesday night. This is a late tip, by the way. This is part of the reason I'm not doing a recording is this game's going to end at probably about 11:30 or midnight Eastern. Kentucky was a 1.5-point favorite according to FanDuel earlier in the day. I don't know if it has changed, but why this is significant, Mark Pope's first big road test as the Kentucky head coach. Bottom line, when I look at this game, a couple things stand out. Clemson, for people who have not watched, and we've done a deep dive, but Clemson, for people who have not watched, they are 7-1. Their only loss is at Boise. I'm kind of blown away as to why they would have even scheduled that game. There has to be some kind of tie to Boise, or one of their players is from Idaho, whatever. But other than that, they've looked pretty good. Beat Penn State in an MTE down in Florida. And the thing you need to know about Clemson, they shoot the ball pretty well. Chase Hunter is their star guard. But they also, what's interesting to me, they have a lot of size, but they don't rebound particularly well. And when I look at this game, I know that Vegas is telling us that Kentucky is that it's going to be close, right? Because what Vegas is essentially telling us is like, well, wait a second now. Kentucky is a 1.5-point favorite on the road. Clearly, Vegas is saying either one, it's going to be close, or two, they want you to take Clemson. But while I get what the number is saying, to me, I just think this is a bad matchup for Clemson, and I think Kentucky's going to win this game. Clemson, not a very good three-point defense. Kentucky, statistically, they take a lot of threes, so the percentage is probably a little lower than than you would expect, but they shoot a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. Kobe Bray is making like 62%, but when Kentucky put this roster together, the thing that stood out about them was the fact that basically everybody on this team could make a three-point shot. So you look at the rebounding advantage Kentucky is going to have. You look at the three-point advantage they're going to have. And the other thing with Kentucky, they're a very good defensive team. Top 10 in the country in three-point percentage defense, top 10 in the country in blocks. I like Kentucky to win this game in Clemson, South Carolina. Really quickly, let's get to another big road test for the SEC team. And it is the coach, of course, who used to be at Kentucky. He's now at Arkansas. Arkansas at Miami. Going into this game, Arkansas is actually, I was a little bit surprised by this, but maybe not really surprised by this. But Arkansas was a 4.5-point favorite just a day ago. It appears as though it's up to 5.5 now. So listen, bottom line is sort of a must-win game for Arkansas. They're sitting at 5-2. They have no bad losses, but they have no good wins. Lost to Baylor on a neutral, lost to Illinois on Thanksgiving Day. And the big thing, if you watch that game, it goes without saying, they gave up 15 three-point shots, okay? Illinois finished 15 of 31 from three. I think it goes without saying there needs to be a little bit more defensive intensity for the Arkansas Razorbacks in this game. They also did not shoot the ball well. I think they went 0 for 7 in the first half, finished 5 of 17. That's kind of been a trend with this team. They don't shoot great in the first half for whatever reason. But I'll tell you this, Arkansas loses this game, it ain't going to be pretty, okay? We're going to have a lot to talk about on Wednesday if they lose this game. But Arkansas coming into this game 5-2, Miami 3-4 with, how about this? Miami has lost 4 straight, including to Charleston Southern, who had not beaten a Division I opponent prior to playing Miami. And so I just bring it up. I think Arkansas wins. The money is coming on Arkansas. You got to get this win, man. You got to get this win. You got to get back on track. Arkansas, by the way, in just a couple days is playing Michigan in the Jimmy V Classic. So you win this one, you get on a little bit of a roll going into SEC play. But yeah, I'll just tell you this, Arkansas, win this game or else we're going to have a lot to talk about come Wednesday. Really quickly, really 2 more big SEC, ACC challenge games. A game that I'm really interested in, but I'm kind of bummed there's some injury issues. Ole Miss at LSU, okay, or at Louisville, excuse me. I said Ole Miss LSU. It was Ole Miss Louisville, okay. So Louisville, of course, goes to the battle for Atlantis. The issue is they go to the championship game, destroy Indiana, but the problem becomes they ended up losing Keyshawn Pryor to an ACL injury at that tournament. Why is that important? He's basically the only size that Louisville has down low. I remember when Louisville put this roster together, they were really looking to add a 5-man. He's more of a stretch 4, but he was playing the 5. He gets hurt. He's out for the year. And now Louisville is in a situation where they're probably going to have to play Javon Hadley, who's like a 6'6", 6'7" forward at the 5. So they are in a really tough spot coming into this game. Ole Miss, by the way, played in that San Diego tournament. I watched them play BYU, beat BYU in overtime. BYU looks really good. Ole Miss was better than them. They lose basically at the buzzer to Purdue. So one thing I will say about all these games, you think about all the travel that's involved, right? And we'll talk about some of these teams that are playing off of a trip to Maui, North Carolina, UConn, etc. But think about some of the travel for these teams. Ole Miss was probably in San Diego until Friday night, Saturday morning, fly back into Oxford, probably Saturday from the West Coast, then immediately have to fly back out to Louisville. I think that could be an impact on this game. Will not be touching it, will not be betting it. But I would say this is I would lean Ole Miss just because I don't know what interior size Louisville is going to have, because that is a crushing loss. Last game from Tuesday night, Syracuse, Tennessee. Okay. So Syracuse goes on the road. It's a battle of the orange, orange versus orange. And Tennessee is a comfortable favorite. And I see no reason for them to lose this game. Syracuse played in one of the holiday tournaments in New York City. They lost both games. Listen, we've talked about Syracuse before. I don't know what this program is right now. They weren't good in the before Boeheim retired. They're not very good now. That is a top 5 to 6 fan base in college basketball when they're rolling, but they haven't been rolling for a minute. Tennessee, meanwhile, to their credit, they go to that Baha Mar Invitational. They take care of Baylor. They take care of Virginia in that event. And listen, I said this earlier, is Rick Barnes, man, like everybody wants to criticize Rick Barnes, hasn't made a Final Four since whatever. They did make the Elite Eight last year, lost to Purdue. This guy just every year, it doesn't matter who he has, they just win year over year over year over year. And this year's no different. The big name to know there, Chaz Lanier. Remember, he was a big portal name. I remember talking about him in May. It was down to Tennessee, BYU, and Kentucky. He ends up choosing Tennessee. In that championship game of the Baha Mar Classic, 25 points, all in the first half. So you know he could fill it up quick. I don't see the scenario where Tennessee loses at home on Tuesday night. All right, let's go to Wednesday. There's a lot of big games. I'm actually going to start with not maybe the biggest game on paper, but in terms of significance, I don't think there is a bigger game than Baylor traveling to UConn. Okay, so UConn, of course, listen, first of all, we're recording on Tuesday. There is no point spread. I would think UConn would be a very small favorite. It is at home. It is at Gamble Pavilion. For people who don't know the layout of UConn, they play home games in downtown Hartford, but they also play in an on-campus arena called Gamble Pavilion. It is one of the toughest road environments for a big game in college basketball. I've seen a million games there. But let's talk about UConn for half a second, because this was a question I got a ton on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of last week. And we talked about it on the Tuesday night show live from Vegas. I was at the Kansas-Duke game. But let's dive into UConn a little bit, because obviously when you're the defending national champs, when you've lost one out-of-conference game in the last 2 years, when you lost 3 games total last year, and you lose 3 games in 3 days in Maui, yeah, there's going to be conversation. There was conversation about Dan Hurley. There was conversation about not going back to Maui. But I think the big consensus everybody wants to know is, what is wrong with UConn? Well, good news. You're probably in luck, because not only, everybody knows I'm a UConn guy, but I was with my parents last week. My mom and my stepdad are both UConn alums as well. So guess what? We watched a lot of UConn basketball. We probably talked about it way too much around the Thanksgiving dinner table. So with UConn, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not pretty right now. I also don't totally think it's quite as bad as a lot of people think. Listen, you go 0-3 coming off of a 37-3 season. It's going to create a lot of headlines. But one, but you got to remember, UConn lost so much talent off last year's team. Donovan Clingan, I think, is going to be the best player off of the NBA draft last year. Steph Castle might end up competing with him. Those were 2 of the starters. By the way, Cam Spencer scored 51 points in a G League game on Monday night, 12 3-pointers made. So that shows you how deep that team was. Tristan Newton was the point guard. He's playing for the Indiana Pacers. So 4 kids drafted, 3 in the NBA, 1 dropping 50 in the G League. So you lose that talent. But I think, to me, the issues with UConn are twofold. One, you were not really able to replace Tristan Newton as your starting point guard. And I think if you're not a UConn fan, if you don't watch him every day, I don't think you realize the impact that that kid had. You know that Tristan Newton, think about this. All the great guards that have come through UConn, Kemba Walker, Shabazz Napier, Ray Allen, whoever. Tristan Newton set the school record with most triple-doubles. In other words, you could argue. I don't know if I'm ready to make the argument, but you could absolutely argue. Best point guard in UConn history. Kemba had the best year, but Tristan Newton was unbelievable. And watching that game and watching that event in Maui, you could clearly see they don't have a guy to replace him, okay? This was a kid that was 6'5", 6'6", could get to the rim, 38, 39% three-point shooter, second-round pick, as I said. And UConn, I think, is really struggling right now at the point guard position. You could see, by the way, that first game against Memphis just has crazy athletic guards, got in UConn. So they couldn't even run offense. Like when I look at the 3 games in Maui, Memphis was just like, I know it went to overtime, but that was a game that wasn't like UConn did not play well for the first 32, 33 minutes of the game. And so I only bring it up to say this, is that the guard play is definitely an issue. Listen, a couple things. One, Hassan Diarra is great. He's part of the he was part of the show last year. We had him on a million times. I love Hassan. But to go from 6th man to an NBA player, it's just a big ask. And then the other thing, Aiden Mahaney, no disrespect intended, but I never understood when people in the preseason were talking about, and really in the summertime, remember when he committed? I remember doing my portal rankings. I had him like in the late 20s, early 30s of impacts transfers, and UConn fans were mad at me. I'm like, listen, these other media members that are selling you that he's the answer at point guard, he ain't it. He's an off-the-ball player. I've always envisioned him as like a 7th guy 7th player. So your 7th man, 2nd or 3rd guy off the bench, shoot some threes, whatever. He was never going to be a point guard. So I think that's issue number 1 for UConn. They don't have a point guard. And you know where that hurts? It hurts in many places. Is one, getting to the rim. They just have nobody that can get to the foul line and create fouls. That was a huge issue, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But also, it's just harder to run your offense. The offense just did not run as smoothly because you don't have that point guard that can take over games. Now, the second issue, your big guys got to stay out of foul trouble, okay? And I know we're going to talk about the foul discrepancy in a minute, but UConn's big guys, first 2 games, they played 2 centers, Samson Johnson, a returnee, and Terrace Reed, a backup who transferred in from Michigan. Terrace Reed was maybe the best player on the floor against Memphis. The problem was both of them were in foul trouble. Each fouled out against Memphis, each fouled out against Colorado. Dayton, there was issues as well. And it led to what ended up being the biggest issue for UConn. And this is an insane stat. They were minus 50 in free throw attempts in Maui. How about this? I'll just read the stats really quick because I wanted to look them up before we came on air today. In Maui, they shot 11 free throws as opposed to 30 for Dayton in the last game. So that's a minus 19 free throw discrepancy. They shot 13 against Colorado. Colorado shot 28. That's minus 15. They shot 24 against Memphis. Memphis shot 40. That's minus 16. So the other team got 50 more free throw attempts. By the way, that's why Dan Hurley was mad. By the way, it's okay for Dan Hurley to yell at refs. They're adults. They'll be okay. Stop whining about Dan Hurley. A year ago, all the media that's criticizing him now called him a genius. So I bring it up because, listen, you're back home. You have to get right. And I think the good news for UConn as we start to actually preview this game, I think this is actually a pretty good matchup for UConn. This is a game where when you look at UConn and you look at Baylor and you look at Baylor's strengths and you look at Baylor's weaknesses, I think it actually matches up pretty favorably for the Huskies. UConn in this game, Baylor does not. Baylor's best athletic player, VJ Edgecombe, which some people are saying is going to be a top 10 pick. He's banged up. He got an ankle injury against St. John's, played through it the second game, but wasn't 100%, sat out their last game. I think that if he's not 100%, that's advantage UConn. And Baylor down low doesn't really have a ton of size. Now, they have Norchad Omier, the transfer from Miami, who's averaging like 11 boards per game. But he's like 6'7", 6'8" on a good day. And listen, I'm just saying this. If UConn can't keep that kid off the boards, and if they can't not get in foul, if they get in foul trouble in this game, the big guys, there's no hope for the rest of the year. There's no hope for the rest of the year. You have to keep your big guys out of foul trouble. They have to be able to defend without fouling. And if you can't do it against a 6'7" low post player, there's no answers. So I bring it up to say, as I look at this game, I actually do think it's advantage UConn. I think the 3 losses in 3 days were humbling. And I look back to the Maui thing. Listen, the Memphis game, UConn fans, you can yell at me, you can disagree. Memphis was the better team for the first probably 75% of the game. It probably should have been a loss. You almost stole it in overtime, whatever. The Colorado game, listen, that was the second round game. You lose by 1. That was a game. Liam McNeely was the best player. He gets hurt, goes to the locker room, comes back. And during that stretch is when Colorado made the run. Also, Alex Karaban, veteran leader, goes 1 for 7 from 3. If Alex Karaban goes 2 for 7 from 3, you win that game. The Dayton game was whatever. So I don't think UConn's as bad as everybody thinks. Listen, they're not going to, maybe they do, it'd be incredible, but they're not going 37-3 this year. Listen, I still think they're an NCAA tournament team. I think they're probably closer to a 5 or a 6 seed. I think they're going to compete for a Big East title, but I don't think they're going to run away with it. The good news is that 1, the Big East just doesn't appear to be very good, but 2, some of the teams that you're going to play outside of Marquette, like I don't know that there are the matchup issues that you saw in Maui. Bottom line, I think UConn beats Baylor. I'll say final score 82-76. I think UConn gets back on track on Wednesday. Again, we're previewing Wednesday's games. We'll have a reaction show on Wednesday to Tuesday night's games, as well as the college football playoff stuff. But let's keep it going with some other interesting notes and interesting games. Let's get to North Carolina versus Alabama. So Alabama traveling to Chapel Hill. We've talked about Nate Oates' crazy scheduling. They've already played at Purdue. They played Illinois and Birmingham. Then they played the Players Era Festival where they played They played Oregon, Rutgers, and Houston. So their schedules that say now they go to Carolina. Carolina, of course, is coming off a 1-2 trip to Maui. Now, what's worth noting, what did I just say? The travel to me is going to be interesting. There's always a lag and a lull for teams coming back from Maui. That's part of the reason why some teams just don't want to go there. I think that's part of the reason why Dan Hurley says he doesn't want to go there going forward. But listen, North Carolina, we'll see what they look like. But remember, Alabama played 3 games in 5 days in Vegas. They spent 5-6 days in Vegas. They probably fly out Saturday night, land Sunday morning. They got to fly out Tuesday to go to Chapel Hill. So the schedule will be interesting. What will also be interesting is what does Alabama look like? Right before we came on air here on whatever today is, Tuesday afternoon, we got news that one of Alabama's most important players, a kid by the name of Latrell Wrightsell, is out for the season with an Achilles injury. You feel terrible about that. 5th-year senior, transfer from Cal State Fullerton. But I also think it's a pretty important injury for Alabama because Alabama coming into this game, we think about Alabama, all the 3-point shots, they're not shooting the ball particularly well. 32% shooting from 3, closer to 33%, but it doesn't change the fact that Latrell Wrightsell was hitting 42% from behind the 3-point arc. And it's not like he doesn't take a lot as well. He actually leads second on the team behind Mark Sears with 45 attempts. So he's by far their best 3-point shooter. Now listen, they have a kid named Chris Youngblood coming back from injury, but this is a crushing piece of news for Alabama because they need 3-point shooting. They need him. I'll also say this, might just be time for Mark Sears to step up. Mark Sears, of course, was the preseason SEC Player of the Year, had a couple pretty nice games in Vegas for the Players Era Championship, but it's also worth noting early on, his numbers are down from a year ago, averaged 21 points last year, down to 16 this season, and also shot 43% from 3 last year, only shooting 28% this year. Again, played pretty well out in Vegas, 24 against Houston, 24 against Rutgers, 11 versus Oregon. Maybe this is the thing that gets him going. North Carolina, listen, one thing I'll say, I think this is the time, it sounds crazy with college hoops, you can start seeing very clear deficiencies. And sometimes we might just have to accept that a team just isn't very good, okay? And so I bring it up because North Carolina, I don't think they're terrible, but we talk, nobody covers the college hoops portal like Torres, okay? And I only bring it up because the fact that North Carolina in the offseason, we talked about, They went after a million big guys in the portal and missed on all of them. Missed on Cliff Omoyori, who they'll face for Alabama. Missed on Jonas Adu from Tennessee. Missed on, I can't even remember all the names now. I know I've said it a few times. There was a marquee player who they thought was going to enter the portal, didn't, and they never were able to overcome it. And so I bring it up with North Carolina. The issue is just size down low. I just don't know that they are going to have enough big bodies for the games that matter. Have a kid named Jalen Washington who's playing okay. Jalen Withers is playing okay, but they got out rebounded by like 9 in the loss in Maui to Michigan State. In the loss against Auburn, listen, I'm not going to blame anybody for losing to Auburn because we're going to talk about Auburn in a minute. They're the best team that I've seen in college basketball so far this year, but they got out rebounded by 8 against Auburn. So with North Carolina, this is going to be an issue all year. If you're looking for a positive, their 2 All-American freshmen actually played very well a few days ago in the last play in the last game in Maui. 18 for Drake Powell, 14 for Ian Jackson off the bench in the loss to Michigan State. If you're asking me for a pick, I don't have a great feel. I would lean North Carolina only because of 2 things. One, just the travel for Alabama. Again, they probably finished that game in Vegas at probably midnight Eastern, 12:30 Eastern time. Had to fly back probably that night, probably landed Sunday somewhere in the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. range. Now you got to get back on a plane, 36 hours later to go to Carolina. I think this one is going to be ugly, low scoring. I would take Carolina in this game. Really quickly, take a quick swig of water. I need some water to talk about this one. The big one. Oh, it's big. It's big. Size matters, and this one is big, okay? How about this? Number 2, Auburn at number 9, Duke. This is Wednesday night. So, again, if you're listening early, I apologize, but it's Wednesday night. It is at Cameron Indoor Arena, and it is, I'll say this, it's a battle of 2 of the best teams that I've seen so far this season. Listen, I'll say this, it's not a big secret. Auburn's the best team in college basketball right now. Not saying they're going to be the best. They're not ranked number 1. Kansas is still ranked number 1. And listen, I'll say this. If you want to keep Kansas at number 1 because you thought they were the best team, Kansas, to their credit, has won against Duke on a neutral, against Carolina at home, against Michigan State on a neutral. That's fine. But if it's just based on what has happened from day 1 of the season on, not only is Auburn the best team, it's not even close, okay? Now, I know they needed to rally to beat Iowa State, but in the first round of Maui. But here's the crazy part. After that, destroyed Carolina and then destroyed Memphis in that game for the Maui. That Maui championship game was over like 6 minutes in. It was just like Memphis has no shot in this game. And so you look at this team, they're playing well. I didn't even mention the fact that they beat Houston on a neutral. That was after the famous fight that happened in the middle of the year. It's the best team in college basketball right now. Janai Broome transferred 3 years ago from Morehead State. Best player in college basketball so far. How about this? 21 points, 13 rebounds, 3 blocks per game. Coming into this one, Janai Broome is an absolute monster. He's added the 3-point shot. And I think what stands out to me about Auburn so far this year, they just have so many guys and so many different guys can beat you over the course of an individual game. Against Houston, Tahad Pettiford, freshman, was awesome. Chad Baker-Mazzara has had his moments. Dylan Cardwell has played well. Denver Jones has played well. Chaney Johnson has played well. They have so many different guys that can beat you. They're the best team I've seen so far. Really quickly, Duke. Speaking of teams I've seen, I saw them in person on Tuesday night in Vegas. Now, Duke, we talked about it that night. They started out slow. That was like their 5th day on the West Coast. They had played Arizona already. They're still a really good team. And I know, everybody wants to make fun of Duke and they stink and Coach K and John Shire and whatever. Doesn't really change the fact that they're a darn good team. And here's the truth. They kind of outplayed Kansas. I don't want to say they outplayed them, but let me put it this way. They easily could have won that Kansas game after falling down by a bunch early. They end up losing by 3. We talked about it in the final minute of that game. Let's never forget they had 2 more opportunities to get the victory. Cooper Flag turnover, Con Knipple turnover, and then boom, you end up losing by 3. So this is a team, listen, again, know it's easy to make fun of Duke. No, we got a lot of Kentucky fans that listen. that Kentucky game, that Kansas game, both could have gone the other way. And it's kind of crazy because both of those games, really more so the Kansas game, they didn't play well out of the gate. And so you look at this team, the one thing I'll say about Duke, Cooper Flagg's a really good player. They're getting really good production from other guys. Tyrese Proctor was probably their best player against Kansas. 15 points, 5 three-pointers made in that game. Con Knipple we talked about, Malowatch, the big man. And so coming into this game, I'll say this. Auburn's the best team I've seen. But one, Auburn, I'll be curious about that Maui hangover, that Maui bump. Again, remember, they played Wednesday, probably flew out Wednesday night, maybe Thursday morning. Producer Matt, you ever been to Hawaii? I don't know how long the flight is. I'm guessing it's probably a 15-hour flight. I mean, I live in LA, and to get to Hawaii is like 7 hours, okay? So to get from Hawaii to Auburn, Alabama, my guess is if they left, let's say Saturday at 10 a.m. local time, they probably got home at 10, 11 p.m. local time on Saturday. And again, it's a quick flight, quick turnaround to fly up to North Carolina. And again, to play against a really good team in a really good venue. According to producer Matt's quick Google research, it is a 10-hour, 9-minute flight. I assume that's a direct flight. I would assume Auburn was probably flying charter, so it probably was a direct flight. It's a long freaking flight. That is a long freaking flight after playing 3 straight days of basketball. Listen, I think Duke's maybe like the second or third best team I've seen this year. I think after Auburn, I think it's Kentucky's in the conversation. I think Duke's in the conversation. I think Kansas is in the conversation. Can't put them ahead of Kentucky or Kansas, but they're like one of the top 5 teams I've seen. Everybody's taken losses this year. UConn's taken a bunch. Arizona's taken a bunch. Duke's taken a couple. I like Duke, I think, to win this game. Home court advantage, a lot of travel for Auburn. Give me Duke. All right, listen, bottom line, we're going to wrap it there. I know we had some Iowa State Marquette stuff prepped. We're at an hour, 6 minutes here on a Tuesday, and we got 2 more shows to do this week. So this is what I need you to do. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, go ahead, do me a quick favor and make sure that you are subscribed. By the way, I'm seeing a lot of Ryan Day to Florida State, Lincoln Riley to Ohio State. Yeah, we'll break down the Lincoln Riley to Ohio State rumors, and I'm totally being sarcastic. Break those down on Wednesday, but I'll tell you what, that's what we're going to do. We're going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Appreciate everybody's listening. We got a great live crowd, and here's the best part. We're going to be back Wednesday afternoon, same time, same place, 1 Central, 2 Eastern. We're going to react to the college football playoff rankings. I've said it a few times. My hunch is that the College Football Playoff Committee puts Alabama in position to get the final at-large bid. It's going to make Ole Miss fans mad. It's going to make South Carolina fans mad. And if you saw Mario Cristobal's comments on Tuesday, you'll know that it'll make Miami fans mad as well. Do want to get out of here. Do appreciate everybody's support. It is time for me to go. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. I saw the Lakers lost again. They kind of stink. Maybe JJ Redick isn't the, God's gift to basketball. Maybe we'll discuss that another day, but we're out of here for now. Appreciate your support, and we'll be back on Wednesday with another episode.